Chaos in the skies. Passengers trapped for 8 hours on plane after dense fog disturbs flight to Toronto. A routine international flight turned into a nightmare journey after thick fog forced a last-minute diversion, leaving passengers stranded inside an aircraft for hours in the middle of the night. Now it's time to dig deeper and understand the full story through this AI podcast.
We usually think of modern air travel as a kind of magic portal.
Right, yeah.
Like you step into a metal tube in a sunny tropical paradise like Cancun, the doors close, you read a book, take a nap, and suddenly you step out 4 hours later into a bustling, chilly Canadian city.
Totally.
It is supposed to be seamless, like almost invisible. You are essentially teleporting.
It's true. I mean, we take that modern miracle entirely for granted. We expect the logistical machine to work exactly as advertised, largely because it almost always does.
Yeah, exactly.
But when that portal breaks down, the illusion just shatters. And what we're looking at today is a situation where the machine didn't just break down, it actually trapped the people inside it.
Exactly. For you listening today, we are going deep into a story that completely dismantles that illusion of seamless travel.
Oh, absolutely.
It comes from this incredible article titled "The Fogbound Tarmac, WestJet's 14-hour diversion ordeal." And this is a story about how a completely routine vacation flight, WestJet flight WF2695, morphed into a grueling overnight nightmare.
Right.
But it's not a story about a plane crashing. It's a story about what happens when strict, unyielding international border regulations collide head-on with a sudden operational diversion.
Which is such a fascinating friction point, You have the aviation safety side, which is highly agile. It's designed to react to weather and keep the aircraft physically safe.
Right, the pilots and the planes.
Yeah. And then you have the border security side, which is rigid, it's bureaucratic, and it's strictly bound by physical geography.
Oh, man.
When those two systems interact unexpectedly, the human beings caught in the middle they become secondary to the paperwork.
It is the ultimate administrative nightmare. Because for the passengers on this flight, the terror wasn't the flying part. The terror was being parked safely on the ground, trapped inside that metal tube for 8 agonizing hours, completely unable to escape.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this because we need to set the scene. It's early Thursday morning. We are following a Boeing 737 packed with passengers heading home from Cancun International Airport, flying to Toronto Pearson International Airport. Normally, that's just a smooth 4-hour hop.
Right.
But as they approach Toronto, the environment turns hostile. Toronto was sitting under a severe weather system, specifically what officials called a yellow fog advisory.
Which, I have to say, sounds like a hazard from a dystopian sci-fi novel.
It really does.
But aviation-wise, what does that actually mean? Because my first thought is, it's the 2020s. Don't commercial planes literally land themselves on autopilot now? Why does fog even matter to a modern Boeing 737?
It's a common misconception, actually, and it's a great question. Yes, planes have auto-land capabilities. They operate using something called the Instrument Landing System, or ILS.
Okay.
Airports project these radio beams up from the runway to guide the plane down. But ILS is categorized into different tiers, Category 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and it's based on how precise the equipment on the ground and in the plane is and how heavily trained the crew is.
Okay, so not all runways and not all planes are created equal.
Exactly. And even with the highest tier, Category 3, there is still usually a decision height.
A decision height.
Yeah. It's a point maybe just 50 feet off the ground where the pilot must be able to visually see at least the runway lights to proceed.
Oh, wow.
So if the fog is so dense that the visibility drops below the legal minimums for that specific aircraft and crew on that specific runway, it doesn't matter how advanced the computer is.
They just can't land.
By aviation law, they cannot attempt the landing. The pilot eventually had to announce that it was simply unsafe to land at Pearson. The visibility was just completely wiped out.
So passenger Trevor Lester, who was on this flight, noted that the aircraft circled Toronto repeatedly.
Right.
And you can imagine that feeling. You're looking out the window, expecting the familiar glow of the city grid, and instead, it's just this impenetrable wall of yellow-gray soup.
Oh, it's so disorienting.
You hear the engine schooling up and down as you make these heavy turns over and over.
The crew is entering a holding pattern. They are buying time, hoping the fog lifts enough to meet those visual minimums.
Right.
But eventually, fuel becomes the deciding factor. You just cannot circle forever.
Right. You're on a ticking clock.
Exactly. So the pilots did exactly what they were trained to do. They executed a diversion to their designated alternate airport. At approximately 1:17 a.m. local time, they safely touched down at the region of Waterloo International Airport, which is about an hour's drive west of Toronto.
So walk me through the logic here, because if you are sitting in that cabin, your immediate thought is probably massive relief.
Oh, for sure.
You survived the spooky holding pattern, the wheels are on the solid earth. It is like driving home from a long road trip, making it to your own neighborhood, but a sudden roadblock forces you to park 2 towns over in the pitch dark.
Right.
You think, fine, this is annoying. I'll just order a very expensive Uber and be in my bed in an hour.
That is the logical human expectation. I mean, you feel the engine spool down, you hear the ding of the seatbelt sign, and you expect the doors to open.
Yeah.
But safely landing the aircraft was only the physical half of the equation, because once those wheels stopped, the passengers slammed into something much harder than fog. They hit an invisible jurisdictional wall.
And this is where the story shifts from a standard weather delay into a genuine psychological thriller.
Truly.
They are in Waterloo. The plane is parked, but the doors stay completely sealed for hours. Why? If the Waterloo airport is physically open and capable of receiving a diverted 737, why can't the passengers just walk off?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the legal status of an international flight.
Okay.
This goes all the way back to the Chicago Convention of 1944, which established the core rules of international airspace.
1944. Wow.
Yeah, because WS 2695 arrived directly from Cancun, it was arriving from a foreign jurisdiction. In the eyes of international border law, that specific Boeing 737 is essentially a sealed, mobile bubble of foreign territory.
Wait, almost like a temporary foreign embassy on wheels.
That is a perfect analogy. The laws of Canada cannot fully reach the people inside that tube until an official diplomatic handover occurs.
Which is customs clearance.
Exactly. It doesn't matter that the physical wheels of the plane are touching Canadian asphalt. Legally speaking, the people inside have not yet entered the country.
Okay, but Waterloo is an international airport. It's right there in the name region of Waterloo International Airport.
Right.
So where are the customs agents? Why not just roll up a set of stairs, walk them into the terminal, and process them?
Because of how border agencies operate at regional airports. Major hubs like Toronto Pearson have Canada Border Services Agency CBSA officers staffed 204/7.
Because they're huge.
Right, they are a massive entry point. Waterloo is what's known as a regional point of entry. Yes, they handle international flights, but on a strict predetermined schedule.
Ah, I see where this is going.
They don't have spontaneous flights arriving from Mexico at 1:06 in the morning. So the customs officers had gone home.
You're kidding.
No, the border was literally closed for the night.
But wait, at what point does human well-being override a logistical border check? If the airport is physically open to receive a diverted Boeing 737, why isn't it staffed to handle the human beings inside it?
That is the exact friction that caused this ordeal. The system is designed entirely for security, control, and revenue collection.
Right.
It is not designed for human comfort during edge cases. The regulations are binary. You are either cleared to enter the country or you are not.
There's no gray area.
None. There is no mechanism in the border control manual for, hey, they've been on board too long, let them stretch their legs in the terminal while we wait.
Jeez.
Because if you let 150 uncleared passengers into a small, unstaffed regional terminal in the middle of the night, you have legally compromised the border.
So if there is no agent to stamp the metaphorical passport, the door to the plane simply cannot open.
Exactly.
Which means the plane becomes a holding cell. And while the bureaucratic system freezes, the human beings inside are boiling over.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about the reality on the ground inside that cabin. These passengers didn't just wait an hour or two. They were trapped on the tarmac for nearly 8 hours.
And we have to factor in the physical environment of a grounded aircraft.
Right, it's not a hotel room.
No, not at all. When a plane is parked for that long without being plugged into terminal power, it has to run its APU, the auxiliary power unit. That's the small jet engine in the tail of the plane that provides electricity and air circulation.
Right, which means there's a constant droning roar. The air being pumped in is incredibly dry. And they had already flown for nearly 4 hours before this started.
Exactly.
They dealt with the anxiety of the aborted landing and the fog. It's the middle of the night. Their circadian rhythms are completely wrecked.
Passenger Trevor Lester's account really highlighted the psychological toll here. He said the absolute hardest part was watching the families.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
You have all these exhausted children who've been traveling all day. It's now 2 a.m., then 3 a.m., then 4 a.m.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I mean that in a pretty grim way. I want you to imagine the sensory overload of this environment. It's like being stuck in a crowded elevator, but with a window showing you the solid ground you aren't allowed to touch.
Yeah.
While people scream around you and nobody will tell you when the doors will open, kids don't care about the Chicago Convention of 1944.
They really don't.
They just know they are trapped. The reports noted that children were crying continuously through the night, and their parents are desperately trying to calm them down, but they are pinned in these cramped 17-inch wide economy seats.
It's awful.
You can't walk them around a terminal. You can't distract them. You are just stuck in this sensory nightmare.
It creates this intense feedback loop of stress. The adults are reaching their breaking points, too. Frustrated passengers literally started shouting, "Let us off," at the flight attendants. You have this rising tide of collective panic and anger. They are looking out the windows. They can literally see the airport terminal. They can see the highway. They can see freedom. But they are held captive by a rule book.
But here is a piece of this that genuinely confuses me. If they are stuck for 8 hours, why did the airline completely fail to provide them with food? The sources explicitly note that passengers received absolutely no food during this massive delay.
Yeah.
Only water. Like, I get that it's 3 a.m., but can't the pilot just order 50 pizzas to the tarmac? Or ask the airport to bring out some granola bars?
You would think so, right. But this brings us to yet another layer of invisible international bureaucracy.
Okay.
Agricultural regulations.
Wait, agriculture. What does that have to do with feeding passengers?
Everything. Waste from an international flight is highly regulated to prevent the spread of foreign pests and diseases.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Nope. When a flight from Mexico lands in Canada, all the trash, every napkin, every half-eaten sandwich has to be handled as restricted international waste.
Yes. It usually has to be strictly incinerated or sterilized by specially certified contractors. If you open the doors of that plane to bring in 50 local pizzas, who is going to manage the resulting international garbage?
Oh, wow. I never even thought about that.
The Waterloo airport at 3 a.m. likely does not have the certified ground handlers available to deal with an unexpected influx of international cabin waste. Plus, you still have the customs issue.
Right, the seal.
Who is physically opening the door to hand the pizzas in? You can't break the seal of the aircraft. The logistical hurdles to simply feeding people during an international diversion are monumental.
That is insane.
So the airline's hands are tied. They can serve whatever sealed water they have left in the galleys, and that is it.
Which practically puts the passengers on a starvation diet for what turns into a 14-hour travel day.
Yeah.
Blood sugar is crashing, people are sleep-deprived, kids are screaming. It is a total breakdown of the social contract of air travel. But it wasn't just the lack of food. The passengers also reported a severe lack of communication from the airline itself. The cockpit essentially went dark.
Which is a classic symptom of what airlines call IROPS, irregular operations. When a massive weather event hits a hub like Toronto, it doesn't just divert one flight.
Right.
It diverts dozens. The airline's operations center suddenly has planes scattered all over the region. The pilots on WS 2695 are likely trying to get a hold of dispatchers who are completely overwhelmed.
So the pilots don't have any updates to give, so they just say nothing at all.
Precisely. But from the passenger's perspective, that silence is agonizing. When you are trapped, the only currency that matters is information.
Yeah, you just want to know what's going on.
When is this ending? What is the plan? When the airline goes silent, the human mind fills the void with worst-case scenarios. The lack of food and communication compounds the feeling of helplessness. It strips away their last illusion of agency. They are reduced to cargo.
Just biological freight waiting to be unloaded.
But the loading dock is legally closed.
Which brings us to the morning. The sun finally comes up on this fog-bound runway. It's a new day, but the nightmare isn't actually over. It just transitions into this deeply absurd, dark comedy phase.
Oh, it really does.
Because finally, after nearly 8 hours of people pleading and shouting and crying to get off the plane, the customs staff arrives at the Waterloo airport.
The bureaucratic gears finally wake up. The CBSA officers are at their desks. The local ground crew is in place. the doors are opened.
My God.
The passengers are finally allowed to stand up and walk down the stairs.
But they aren't released into the wild to grab a taxi or find a bus home.
No.
No, they are let off the plane specifically and only to complete their customs processing. They walk into the terminal, they show their passports, their legal status stamped as having officially entered Canada, and then they are immediately boarded right back onto the exact same aircraft.
It is the pinnacle of bureaucratic absurdity. The grand resolution to their grueling overnight ordeal of being trapped in those cramped seats was to do some paperwork so they could be legally permitted to return to those exact same cramped seats.
So what does this all mean? I mean, think about the dark irony of this situation. After 8 hours of begging to get off the plane, their freedom was just a processing line before being put right back into the exact same tube they had been trapped in all night.
But you see, from the system's perspective, the problem was solved.
Right, the box was checked.
The legal anomaly of the foreign bubble was neutralized. The passengers were now legally in Canada. The fact that they were exhausted, traumatized, and furious was largely irrelevant to the border rule.
That is so frustrating.
Once they were back on board, the flight crew, assuming they hadn't timed out of their legal duty hours, which is a whole other logistical miracle, fired up the engines, the plane took off again, and they made the incredibly short hop back to Toronto.
They finally landed at Toronto Pearson at 10:10 a.m. local time. Just think about the math of that timeline. A flight that was supposed to take roughly 4 hours from Cancun to Toronto stretched into a grueling 14-hour ordeal.
And 10 of those hours were spent entirely within the confines of that specific Boeing 737, mostly parked on the ground, burning APU fuel, waiting for permission to exist legally in the country they were already physically sitting in.
By the time they walked out of Pearson Airport, they were entirely broken down. As the sources point out, for many of these passengers, what should have been a relaxing trip home became a sleepless and profoundly stressful night they are never going to forget.
It's a stark reminder of the fragility of the massive systems we rely on. We build these incredibly complex, overlapping networks, commercial aviation, international customs, airport logistics, and we expect them to interlock seamlessly.
But they don't always.
No, they are brittle. A simple weather anomaly, a drop in visibility below a specific Category 3 minimum, acts as a stress test. It triggers a domino effect. The physical weather forced the diversion, but the legal system's inability to adapt to that diversion is what actually caused the human trauma.
It really makes you realize that when you buy an airline ticket, you think you are purchasing a service like a fast pass across the globe, but you are actually signing a complex legal contract that you don't fully understand until things go spectacularly wrong.
I think that's the core takeaway here, and it brings up a thought I'd love for you to mull over the next time you book an international trip.
Oh, I'm ready.
When we step onto a flight, we think of ourselves as paying customers. We expect a certain level of service, comfort, and basic human dignity.
Right.
But the reality of international law suggests otherwise. Once those cabin doors close, do we temporarily surrender our basic autonomy to international border rules? In the eyes of the law, are we effectively just treated as cargo until a customs agent officially decides we are human beings allowed to touch the ground?
Wow. That is a deeply unsettling thought to take with you to your next departure gate. It definitely makes you look at that seamless magic portal in a whole new light, because when the magic stops, the physics might save your life, but the bureaucracy will keep you hostage. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope it gave you some unexpected insights into the invisible rules that govern our skies, and maybe a newfound appreciation for every single flight that actually lands on time at the right airport. Safe travels, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
Okay, one question for you. How did passengers survive nearly 8 hours trapped inside a diverted WestJet plane with crying children, no food, and little communication after dense fog shut down Toronto Airport, turning a routine 4-hour trip into a 14-hour nightmare? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.